Hey there, Pro Church Media community, this is Jason again. In this super fun tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to create this spatter text effect inside of Photoshop using only a piece of text, an image, some brushes, and some masks. And we're also going to be looking at how to do it with both clipping masks and layer masks, so you can use whichever one you want to depending on which workflow works best for you. I think it's going to be really fun and I hope you're going to learn a lot, so without further ado, let's jump right into it. So we're here inside of Photoshop, and I want to start by creating a new document. I'm going to hit Control-N on the keyboard. That'll bring up the new document window. I'm going to create a new document at 2400 pixels wide and 1680 pixels high, and I'll just call this Jesus Text and hit Create. Alright, so I want to start by, let me just zoom out a bit here. I'm going to start by importing my watercolor image, so I'm going to go up to File and then come down to Place Embedded. And then just navigate to wherever the images that I want. Mine happens to be on the desktop, so I'll just click that, hit place, and I might just make it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to hold Shift and Alternate, and then just drag these corners, and it'll scale it proportionally from the center. And I'll just do maybe something like that. Hit Enter to commit the change, and I think we'll be good to go. All right, so now we need to add our text. So I'll just hit T on the keyboard to bring up my text tool, and then just type in Jesus right here. I'm using Proxima Nova Black from Typekit. If you're a Creative Cloud subscriber, you have access to that for free, so be sure to sync that. Proxima Nova is an awesome typeface, and you'll use it a lot, I guarantee it, so go and sync it. Again, I'm going to scale this up, so I'm going to hit Control-T to bring up the Free Transform tool, and once again hold Shift and Alternate, and then just drag this out to scale it proportionally. Something like that I think will work pretty well, and let's just kind of get this centered up. I think something like that will work pretty well. Okay, so I want to create a group that will eventually be used for a clipping mask, and so I'm going to group this up. So I'm just going to do Control-G, and it's going to place that Jesus text into a group. Now let's think about using our brushes. So I'm going to make a new layer by coming down to this little icon here that says Create New Layer, and then just click it and I have a new layer. Now I'm going to push B on the keyboard to bring up my brush tool. If you don't have a lot of brushes, or you're just looking for some really great ones, you can get a lot from Adobe, from Cal T Webster for free if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber. To do that, just go up to your brush panel, click on this drop down menu, come over to this little icon here, click on it, and then go down to Get More Brushes. It'll take you to this web page where you can download all of these awesome packs, which are just amazing. You'll definitely want to download them all because they're really cool. But the one we're going to be using for this particular tutorial is the Spatter Brush pack, so be sure to download that, put it on your computer somewhere where you'll know where it is, and then you'll be good to go for this tutorial. So once you have it placed on your computer somewhere, to load it into Photoshop, just go up again to this brush tool bar and then click the drop down menu, come over here and say import brushes, and then just navigate to where it is on your computer, click on the icon, hit load, and it'll load it up into this panel. Now I have mine all kind of organized because I have a bunch of different brushes, but all my Cal T Webster brushes I keep organized into one folder, and then I have all the different packs organized into their own subfolders. Again, for this one, we're going to be using the Spatter Brushes pack, and so I'm just going to drop down that menu, and then I'm going to be using a brush in here called Pressure Control 1. And since my text is already white, I'm going to make sure my brush is white too, just so they both look the same so I can tell what's going on. Basically, everything in this group is going to reveal this watercolor image, and so it's just going to be helpful for me to see how they work together. They could really be any color that you want, it doesn't really matter, but white just really stands out, so that's what I'm going to do. So as I start brushing, you can see what this brush does. It's really cool, but I think it's a little too big right now, so I'm going to undo that with Control-Z, and then with the left bracket, if I click that, you can see that it's making my brush smaller. If I do the right bracket, it makes it bigger. So I think I'll maybe go down to like 35, and let's see what that does. I'm just going to start brushing, and I think that looks pretty good. And so I'm just going to start brushing around these letters. I don't want to go all the way around the letters because then I won't be able to see them, but maybe like make this look almost like an ink trap down there. Come off the sides, maybe a little heavier towards some of the edges, things like that. And just kind of however you want it. You can always go back and delete things, add more brush strokes, things like that. I'm just going as quick as I can so this tutorial doesn't last forever. And I'm just going to keep brushing around, make it look as random as I can, as organic and free-flowing as I can. Something like that might work. Come down here around the J, maybe flare off the side. Something like that. It almost looks like a horn, so let's maybe do something like that. I think that will be pretty good. And again, you can always come back and change this as you want to. Okay, so before we go any further, I'm gonna get rid of that background layer. Now I want a dark background that this ink spatter can contrast with. So if you hit U on your keyboard, it'll bring up the rectangle tool. And I don't want it to be white, and I don't want it to be pure black, so I think I'll just make like a kind of really dark gray, something like that. And then I'm just going to drag this out and create a rectangle, and then put it down below everything. Now we're ready to create our clipping mask. So I'm going to take my watercolor layer, put it up above this group 1. Now I'm going to right click on watercolor and come down to create clipping mask. And now you can see it's doing exactly what I want. It's using everything within this group as basically an alpha channel to say only reveal the watercolor image within whatever's in that group. And the great thing is since this is already set up, I can add more layers. Like if I wanted to add just some random spatters around, I can do that. And so it's really flexible, and I can delete stuff if I want to, add more things. I could add more text, add more spatters. It's really great and really flexible. Alright, so now let's deal with the edges like I had in my original image like that. So I'm going to get a new brush here, and I think I'm going to use one called Spatter B, and it's way too big right now, so I'm going to just drop down the size maybe to like 100, and then just start brushing around the edges, create some corners here, stuff like that. I'm just using a mouse for this. If you had a tablet and pen, it would be, you'd have a lot more control over it, but if you only have a mouse, you can still do some cool stuff with it. So I think something like that looks pretty good, and I think I'm pretty happy with this. If I wasn't doing the tutorial, I'd obviously finesse this a lot more, but I think this is looking really great right now. So that's basically how you create this with clipping masks. It's pretty easy, and I think we got a really cool look without a whole lot of effort. However, you can also do this with layer masks, so let's look at how we can do that really quick. I'm going to group these all up into a main group. I'll just call this clipping. And I'll go ahead and duplicate that with Control J. And then I want to get rid of this, well, I'll keep the Jesus text, and I could, kind of cheat with this, but I'll show you how to actually go through all this. So I'll delete all my brush layers. I'll keep the watercolor layer. I'm going to release the clipping mask, and I'll keep this dark thing too, so we can still kind of work with this, and I'll call this layer mask. I'll just call it, yeah. It's called layer mask. Okay, so we're going to do this kind of in the opposite way. So what I want to do is first of all make a selection of this Jesus text. So on the actual text icon here, I'm going to hold Control and click with my mouse on that, and you can see it gives me the marching ants around that text. Now I'm going to come over to my rectangle, and I want to basically make a mask, but I don't want to add a layer mask. Well, I do want to add a layer mask, but I first want to invert this selection. So I'm going to do Control Shift I, and now it's inverting the selection. So basically it's going to select everything outside of this Jesus text. And so now with the rectangle selected, I'm going to come down and say Add Layer Mask. And now when I get rid of the Jesus text, you can see it's revealing that watercolor image below, which is what I want. Okay, so now we want to kind of do the same spatter brush effect. So I want to click on the actual mask here, make sure I have my brush tool selected with B, and then come up here. Once again, we're going to use that pressure control, and we're going to use the left bracket to go down to about 35 again. And I want to make sure that this color right here is black, because now when I start brushing onto this mask, it's going to basically, when this is black, it's going to say add. If it's white, it's going to start subtracting. So, that might be the look you're going for if you want to, but for this particular thing, we want to add. So just make sure this is black, and then just start brushing on again like you did before. And again, I'm just going to try to go through this as quick as I can just to, keep this going. And so I'm just going to brush through here really quickly. you get the idea, and you obviously be able to make it look a lot better than I can in this short amount of time. And I think we'll go with something like that. Okay, and now we're going to do the same thing on the edges. So I'm going to grab that Spatterbot B again, go down to basically like 100 or so, and again just start brushing around the edges, the corners, down the sides, something like that. Corner, side, corner, top. And again, we have basically the same look. And so let me, if I enable the clipping, so I'm going to undo that. Obviously it's a little bit different because I can't do the exact same brush thing every time, but it looks pretty much the same, and so you can get the same effect with both techniques, whichever one works best for you. The clipping mask one is a little bit more editable, but the layer mask one might be a little quicker. Just depends on what you like to work with. Okay, so we're going to push this just a little bit further, and I think I'll use the clipping mask one for it. So over here we had a quick little tagline, so I'm going to just add that real quick. Pull up my text tool with T. I'm going to say our light and hope. Hit escape to commit that change. I'm going to use Proxima Nova Thin for this, and I'm going to choose a white color. Let's do a kerning of like 200, and let's actually do thin italic. And then I'm going to do, I'll just drag down the font size, get V to pull up my selection tool, pull it up over here, and I think we have a good tagline. And then I just want to, maybe just tweak the coloring and the lighting just a little bit. So I'm going to come up on the top of here and add a layer adjustment. So I'm going to do adjustment layer, and then hue saturation, hit OK. I'm just going to crank up the saturation just a little bit, just to give it a little bit of punch. That's cool. And then one last thing I want to do is kind of almost do a quick little lighting effect. So I'm going to grab all of this right here, make its own group with Control G, and then duplicate this with Control J. And I'll create a smart object with this, and then I'll just bring it up over here. Let's just call this glow. And then I'm going to come up to filter, Gaussian blur, and then something like 19, or maybe probably 19 or 20, somewhere between 19 and 25 will work pretty well. And it's going to give me this right here, and I want to go to a blending mode of, say, something like probably color dodge. And maybe drop down the opacity a bit, just to give it just a little bit of lighting effect. And so it's just pretty subtle, but I still think it looks pretty cool. Maybe I'll do Control J again just to punch it up just a little bit more, drop the opacity just a bit, just to kind of keep it nice and subtle. I think that looks really great. And so let's make this a little bit bigger, go full screen with it. And there we have our final image, Jesus, Our Light and Our Hope. Great splatter text effect. Didn't take a whole lot of effort, but it still looks really cool. Anyway, that's how you do it, and I hope you found this tutorial really helpful. Go ahead and create your own spatter text effect. I think you'll find it a really cool technique to be able to add to your repertoire, and just have a lot of fun with it. And I will talk to you later.